Hello, everyone.
Hey, welcome.
So me and Jared preached on the 15th of June
Yeah.
on Romans chapter 8, verses 14 to 17.
Yeah, it was Father's Day.
Yep. It was Father's Day, and we got to speak on this passage, but there was a little bit of it, the second half of verse 17, that
The very last bit.
we didn't really talk about that.
Yep, we just kind of left it right out of there. We got all sorts of stuff. Obviously, God is Father was one of the big things we were trying to get through, and then we are sons.
Yep.
Men and women are sons, and you have to watch the sermon if you understand why we're specifically using the word sons.
Yeah, we might not be the best people to say this, but it was a great message. You should check it out. It's definitely... Yeah.
Sounds like more promo hype than anything, but this is good.
Yeah.
And then we talked about adoption. We talked about being heirs, co-heirs with Christ. But yeah, like you said, one phrase at the very end that we totally just ignored in our speaking.
Yeah.
Or preaching.
Yeah.
And it was, you want to read it?
Sure.
Yeah,
It's Romans 8:17. So it says, "And if we're children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ." So we got that part in the sermon.
Yeah, so blow my mind. Yeah.
And now the second part is, "If indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory."
Yeah. So it says last, and that's, you can't deal with everything in every sermon, right? And Paul has this habit of just loading up sentences.
Yep, he has this habit of writing really well and packing a lot of information.
As a guy with a Bachelor of Science degree, I really appreciate it because he really condenses it. It's not like this poetry that's just you take there's rich, deep emotional meaning to it, but Paul just is every word has something he's saying.
Which is fantastic, and it's scripture.
But yeah, you just there's only so much time we have, and it's kind of deals some complexity. So we thought, let's record something and talk about this right now. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and here we are.
Let's do it. So suffering. The reason we didn't want to dive into it in the sermon is because if you first read it, I don't know if you got this, but when I first read it, if we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. So if you want the reward, you have to suffer. And it's almost like this, but then are we talking about the reward of being a child of God? Are we talking about the reward of salvation? What is this reward of this glory that we get to share in if we suffer? Is this works righteousness now?
Totally.
Are we earning something from God?
Yep. And especially within the message, a big point was that as sons, we just have this sort of unconditional love from God.
Yeah.
Right? That's and it's absolutely true, right? And that's a big point that we hit in the sermon. So just throwing this last bit of the verse and without really addressing it super, it can be a little bit confusing. It doesn't really fit with what we're saying.
Right. It's important. It just was moving us in a further direction. And it's this transition statement, right? Because he's talking about suffering here. And then, verse 18 and on in chapter 8, he's now talking more about, our present suffering and, even creation eagerly longs. It's this groaning that's happening, this frustration, this, trying to be liberated, escape this bondage to decay. And so he's transitioning into kind of the next section as well.
Yep.
And we weren't going on really into that next section.
We weren't going to go there. Yeah. And as any chapter of Romans, everything here, as we said, it's super packed and there's a lot of meaning to be explored. Yeah. And as a transition to the next part, it would have been kind of difficult to address that without going into it.
And Paul's just so linear in the way he writes, that one thing leads to the next thing, which needs the next, especially in the book of Romans. And it's just this constant, he's building this argument, he's building this sort of defense of the gospel and our understanding of who we are in Christ. But let's talk about what it means if indeed we share in his sufferings as being, because I think this is significant in being co-heirs with Christ, as the passage says. Heirs of God, co-heirs with Christ. We're part of God's family. So what now does sharing in his suffering means? And I think we have to probably start with his suffering.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. We should start there.
We should start there, right?
Yeah.
It has already happened, right?
Yep.
My suffering's coming, according to this passage, I guess.
Yep. It's a warning.
But his suffering has happened. So what's his, we talk about his, one of the things we were talking about before was it's not, we're not talking about his ability to accomplish the redemption of all humanity through his death on the cross. Like, we're not doing that.
Sure.
Our suffering is not saving people.
Sure. Our suffering does not contribute to the acting of salvation that Christ had already accomplished for us.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
not adding to what he did.
No, yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so, but he suffered. Like, he was persecuted, he was tormented, he was
Betrayed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And by people who were super close to him, right?
Yep.
Which, I mean, I guess is part of what betrayal means.
Makes
But,
it
like,
deeper, yeah.
I
for
mean,
sure.
obviously his people, as the Jewish people, betrayed him, but also like his closest friends turned their back on him too. Like, there was suffering that happens for the sake of the mission of God. And so not necessarily our suffering being salvation, but our suffering being participating in the mission of God as children of God, part of his family.
Sure.
The family business.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the salvation of mankind as what Christ did, right? Obviously, the work of salvation is Christ's, but in our own work of being perfected and being made in the image of Christ, we're called to take on the suffering of Christ, to be made in the likeness of Christ, as the suffering servant that is Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, the student is not above the master, right? And if they persecuted me, they'll persecute you. And so, not that we're supposed to seek after suffering, right? This isn't like go out and beat yourself up so that you get the glory of God, but it's just a natural reality, a natural outcome of faithfully serving God in a broken world, of choosing right in a world that chooses wrong.
Yeah, there's that passage that Jesus talks. I think that's what you were referencing about the suffering that we will face because they persecuted Jesus, but they also persecuted the prophets.
Yeah.
Like before. So there's like a pattern in the Bible of the righteous being persecuted because the world is under the control of evil and the evil one. Right. So naturally, by opposing the system of things, right, like the way that the world is, you're going to be persecuted because you're in opposition to the world. You're condemning the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I hear Christians though talking about it, and they talk about sometimes I'm just going to say, I don't know how else to say this. Sometimes Christians are just jerks, and so people mistreat them because they're jerks.
Yep.
Right? I mean, this is a reality. We all have our moments.
Yep.
Some of us have more moments than others. And I think we almost like...
Well, being perfected at different rates.
We're being perfected at different rates, sure.
Yeah.
You're so generous and tactful. I love you. And so we have to be careful that we don't use like our suffering as like a justification. Like, the world's talking bad about us. That must mean we're doing something wrong, right?
Sure. I agree with that.
Because like sometimes,
Yeah.
people are looking down on you not because you're doing something right, but
Yeah.
actually just because you're doing something wrong in this case.
Yeah.
And so it's not like we use suffering as the measure of it,
Yeah.
but I think our expectations in going forward and what it means to be a child of God has to be prepared for. It has to be prepared for suffering.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to get caught off guard and just totally derailed.
Yeah. It's like truth hurts, but also being hurtful hurts. That also hurts.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, just to add to what you're saying, like, I think that's totally what Paul, like, is preparing believers to do, right? Like, what we covered in the sermon is this identity thing, like, he's clarifying who they are now as children of God. And he's like, okay, that's the great news and like what you're going to have to hold on to. But here's the reality of the situation, right?
Yeah.
Taking on the calling of Christ means that your life will be very similar to that of Jesus, like not to the same extreme, obviously, but it will become more similar to that of Jesus, including his suffering. And I don't think you need to be out there searching for suffering because it will come to you as you try to follow Jesus faithfully.
Right.
And just naturally, like.
But when we live life doing everything we possibly can to avoid pain or suffering, I think that's where we get derailed in following after God. Because then that almost, and that becomes our, if it's pain-free, it must be from God. And if it's painful, it must not be from God. And it's like, no, that's not it at all.
That's not true.
That's not at all. And when we talk about heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, I think there's this desire to get to be, the trust fund kid who doesn't have to work a day in their life.
Yeah.
and just coast through life and like, I got everything I need, no problems, right? But even there, in those situations, like we've seen the reality shows, right? There are problems. Their lives can be a mess. Even though they have like everything handed to them, their lives can be a mess. And so even there, they're not avoiding suffering. They still have suffering, even they may not have Jesus, but they have unlimited daddy's money.
Yeah. The life like of just having everything given to you is not a good life, right? Like it's a life that it doesn't accomplish what we're called to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And so while in some ways we have been just given everything,
Yep.
God still wants us to live in this world, in the reality of this world, in a broken world, and that will mean suffering. And so we live in knowing that we have, but still having to live.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's the sort of like thing that Paul always does, and like the reality that I think he tries to demonstrate, which is like, you have been adopted into sonship, and that's like a permanent thing, so you can rest assured.
Yeah.
But then you go a little further, and he's like, the whole creation's eager expectation for the adoption.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's also happening, right? Like it happened, but it's also being carried out.
Right.
It's this, this dual thing. that's
Right.
happening.
Like, well, I mean, Jesus came and he's coming again, right? Like it's now and then.
Yeah. Cool.
We are saved and we are being saved
Yeah.
for final salvation.
Yeah.
Or whatever, right? Like it's all jumbled up in our constraints of time.
Cool.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
we just wanted, and I just didn't want to leave it with thinking like it's all roses and balloons and
No.
cupcakes.
Yeah. And in our call to action, we actually said to like go and read Romans 8, and if the people did that, it's right there.
It's right there. Yeah, you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to highlight it as well. Like, no, like life is pain. There is pain to life. God knows that, and God will redeem that. God will use that
Yeah.
in how He grows us and shapes us, and how we live out being children of light, living in a dark world.
Yeah. He knows that so much that he endured all of it, right?
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways.
Yeah.
So in 2 Kings 2, Elisha is coming to Elijah, and Elijah says, "What do you want from me?" And Elisha says, "I want to inherit a double portion of your spirit." Right? Like I want to carry it on, but even like
Even more.
yeah, even more. And Elijah says to him, "If you're with me when I'm taken away,
Yeah.
then you'll get it."
Yeah.
And so all these times Elijah's like, "You can go home now if you want. You can go home now if you want." And he's like, "Nope, I'm sticking with you." The prophets come up to him like, things are going to get weird today. And he's like, "Yep, I'm with him to the end." And Elisha does. He follows him to the end.
Yeah.
And he sees him taken up in this fiery chariot. He's like, what's going on? Like, I wasn't expecting that.
You said weird, but
You said weird, but this is even weirder than weird.
Yeah.
And and then the cloak falls down, and he picks it up and he takes it on, and then he hits the water and it spreads again. He's like, God is on me like he was on Elijah. And it's this example of how Elisha stuck with him till the end.
Yeah.
And because of that, there was this glory and this reward. And I think that's the same thing that he's saying. Like, it's not like it's as news to the first century believers that there was going to be suffering. They knew that already. But he's saying, like, stick with me to the end, and there's a glory that you will get to share in. And so our life, sometimes it's great, and we feel excited as like children of God, and sometimes there's suffering. But if we stick with it to the end, there's a glory and there's a hope. And so cling to that.
Yeah.
And be okay with that, because we know that in our uncertainty and in our suffering, who we are is secure in God.
Yeah. And I like that that's what he says right before talking about all the sufferings. It's like, here's your identity.
Yeah.
And that's like, he talks about adoption. He talks about this permanent thing as like the assurance that we can rest in as we go through the sufferings that are unavoidable and part of the process and seen in the life of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
The perfect man suffered. So how much? Yeah.
How much more?
How much more?
Good. Awesome.
Cool.
No, thank you. That was good.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments if you have any questions.
What did you think of that? Should we do more?
Like and subscribe. What do we say?
Yeah. Cool. a little bit common.
Yeah, no, it's good. I just had to get that off my chest, and I'm glad we have a way we can do that.
So catch you next time.
Yep. Thanks so much.